when a powerful HOA fenced off his ranch and locked him out of his own road. One quiet man did the unthinkable. He bought the land beneath the only gate, took the key, and made the entire neighborhood regret crossing him. Jack was a quiet, hard-working man who loved a simple life. He never wanted too much, just peace, freedom, and land where he could be close to nature. For many years, he worked day and night in a factory, saving every dollar he could. He didn't spend much on himself. No big car, no fancy clothes, no big parties. His dream was simple: buy a ranch where he could live in peace, away from city noise, rules, and people telling him what to do. After 20 years of hard work, Jack finally bought his dream, a beautiful piece of land just outside a fast-growing neighborhood. The land had a few trees, some open fields, and an old barn that needed work. Jack didn't mind. He fixed it with his own hands, one nail at a time. He built a small wooden house, planted vegetables, raised chickens, and bought 2 horses. To him, it was perfect. Every morning, he woke up to the sounds of birds. Every evening, he sat under the sky full of stars. There was a neighborhood nearby, filled with shiny homes, trimmed lawns, and neat little streets. That place was run by something called an HOA, Homeowners Association. They had many rules: where to park, what color your house should be, even what kind of grass you could grow. Jack wasn't part of it. His land was outside their official boundary. He didn't care much about what they were doing. He just wanted to be left alone. But some people in that neighborhood didn't like the sight of Jack's ranch. From their windows and balconies, they could see his land. They didn't like his wooden fence, the tall grass in some corners, the old tractor near the barn, or even the horses roaming freely. Some of them called it messy. Others said it was ugly or unsafe. Few HOA board members began talking in their meetings about doing something about Jack's ranch. One day, Jack was returning from town in his pickup truck when he saw a group of people near the edge of his property. They were from the HOA. They were pointing, taking pictures, and measuring the land between the ranch and the nearby houses. Jack parked and walked over. He greeted them politely and asked what they were doing. A woman with a clipboard said they were evaluating some options to improve the neighborhood view. Jack replied calmly that this was his land and he didn't need their improvement. The woman smiled politely, but Jack could tell something was off. She and the others quickly left, but not before whispering among themselves. Jack had a bad feeling for the next few weeks. Strange things began happening. He received letters in his mailbox, not from the government, but from the HOA. The letters were full of suggestions and requests. One said he should paint his barn. Another said he should cut the grass regularly. One even said his horses were a concern for public safety. Jack ignored them. He wasn't a member of the HOA. They had no authority over him then. One morning, Jack woke up and noticed workers digging holes near the edge of his land. He walked over and asked what they were doing. A man in a hard hat said they were putting up a fence. Jack said, "But this is next to my land. Who told you to do this?" The man replied, "The HOA hired us." Jack was shocked. Within 2 days, a tall metal fence was installed all around the part of his ranch that faced the neighborhood. There was only one gate, and it had a keypad lock. On the fence were signs: "Private access only, HOA property, trespassers will be prosecuted." Jack couldn't believe it. That fence was now blocking the dirt road he had used for years to go to town. It was a shortcut that saved him 15 minutes of driving. Now he had to go all the way around, using rough roads that got muddy during rain. Worse, he didn't have the code to the gate. He called the HOA and politely asked for the code. The woman on the phone told him, "Sorry, but this is for community security. Only HOA members have access." Jack felt helpless. He hadn't done anything wrong. He owned his land fair and square. He had always been respectful, paid his taxes, followed the law. And yet here was a group of strangers trying to trap him behind a fence they didn't even build on their own land. Jack tried contacting the local city office, but they said it was a private dispute. He wrote emails, filed complaints, and even met a lawyer, but the process was slow. The fence was already up. At night, Jack would sit on his porch, looking at that cold metal fence shining under the moonlight. He felt angry, but also hurt. All he ever wanted was a quiet life. But some people couldn't even give him that. They judged his way of living, called it unfit, and now had gone too far. Jack started wondering if peace was even possible anymore. But Jack wasn't the type to give up. He began watching. He noticed that the gate stood right on a small strip of land between his ranch and the neighborhood. Peace so small it seemed. Forgotten. And that's when a tiny idea started to grow in his mind. An idea that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't the end of the story. Jack was not the kind of man who liked drama. He had lived most of his life minding his own business. He helped his neighbors when they needed something. He respected people's space, and all he wanted was the same in return.
Oh.
But the fence, the HOA had built, changed everything. It wasn't just a structure made of metal and bolts. It was a message that said you don't belong here. Jack had never felt so insulted in his life. Every morning now he had to take the long road into town, which passed through bumpy trails and muddy spots. It cost him more fuel and wasted more time. He didn't say anything to anyone, just kept his anger inside, building quietly like a fire with no smoke. The worst part wasn't the inconvenience. It was the way they treated him. The HOA refused to give him the gate code, even though the fence clearly affected his land. When he tried to speak to someone in person at their office, they looked at him like he was causing trouble. One man even told him maybe if your place looked more like a proper home, people wouldn't complain. Jack didn't reply, but his fists clenched. He began noticing how the people in the neighborhood started treating him differently. Kids who once waved at him now avoided eye contact. A woman walking her dog near the property line pulled her pet away quickly, as if Jack was dangerous. Some neighbors even filed noise complaints about his tractor even though he only used it during the day. It felt like the HOA had poisoned the entire community against him. All he had done was live quietly on his own land. Jack thought about tearing the fence down himself. He had every tool he needed. He could cut through the bars at night, pull out the posts, and take back what was his. But he knew that would only get him into trouble. The law would not protect him, even though he was clearly the one being wronged. So Jack started collecting information. He took photos of where the fence cut through the road he had always used. Took videos of himself walking up to the locked gate. He saved every letter the HOA had sent, especially the ones that said, "This fence is for the protection and beauty of the community." He began asking questions at the county records office, slowly, carefully. He didn't tell anyone what he was planning. He didn't raise his voice. But inside, a quiet storm was forming. One day, while visiting the city planning department, Jack met a clerk who was kind enough to listen. Jack asked her who legally owned the small patch of land where the gate and fence were standing. Her system and frowned. "That land doesn't belong to the HOA," she said. Jack's eyes lit up. "Then who owns it?" he asked. It turned out the narrow strip of land had been part of an old development plan made by a construction company over 20 years ago. The company had gone bankrupt, and no one had claimed that land since. It had become one of those forgotten properties that slipped through the cracks of paperwork. Technically, it was still up for sale. Jack's heart started beating faster. He asked for all the documents and checked the status. Yes, it was for sale. Better yet, it was cheap. Jack didn't waste a minute. Went home, grabbed his savings notebook, and checked his account. He had enough. More than enough. The money he had saved for emergencies would now become his weapon. He returned the next day, filed the paperwork, and made an offer. Since the land was so small and useless to most buyers, his offer was accepted quickly. Within a few days, Jack became the legal owner of the small strip of land, the one with the only gate access to the road. He didn't tell anyone right away. He wanted to enjoy the feeling for a bit. Every time he walked by the gate, he smiled to himself. He owned it now. The keypad, the gate, the land underneath it.
The HOA had
built their precious security fence on land that wasn't theirs. And now they were trespassing on his property. A few weeks later, Jack changed the game. He hired a local technician and paid him cash to replace the gate's keypad system. The man didn't ask many questions. He simply did the job. Jack chose a new code, one only he knew. Then he added a sign on the gate in big bold letters, "Private land. Entry by permission only. The next day, chaos began. HOA members couldn't get through the gate. Some thought the keypad was broken. Others thought the system had glitched. They tried calling the technician, but he had already deleted the job details. Started showing up at Jack's ranch demanding answers. Jack greeted them calmly and said, "I'm sorry, but that gate stands on my land now. I have the legal documents." Most of them didn't believe him, so Jack took out copies of the paperwork and showed them. He had bought the land. He was the owner. The gate was sitting on his property. Expressions on their faces were priceless: shock, confusion, even fear. One man, who had been very rude before, turned red in the face and started yelling. Jack didn't raise his voice. He just said, "You fenced me out. I didn't like it, so I did what I had to do." The HOA tried to argue that the gate was part of the community system. Jack agreed it was, but the land underneath it was his, and they never had permission to build anything on it. The law was now on Jack's side, and for the first time in months, he felt like he was in control. The HOA quickly called a meeting. They tried to come up with ways to solve the problem. Some members suggested paying Jack for the land. Others wanted to tear the gate down and build another one somewhere else. But Jack wasn't interested in selling. This wasn't about money. This was about respect. They had blocked him out of his own daily route. They had treated him like he didn't belong. And now they were learning what it felt like. Soon the neighborhood began buzzing with gossip. Some people called Jack a genius. Others called him stubborn. But no one could deny the truth. The fence had backfired. HOA board members were flooded with complaints from residents who could no longer use the gate. Why some people were late for work because they had to drive the long way around. Livery trucks got confused. A school bus had to change its route. Every time someone came to Jack asking for the code, he smiled and said the same thing. "You'll need my permission." Jack knew he wasn't being cruel. He wasn't trying to hurt anyone. He had tried to talk before. He had asked for help. He had asked for fairness. But they had laughed at him, ignored him, and fenced him in like an outsider. Now they had to feel what he had felt. Still, Jack wasn't heartless. He allowed emergency vehicles to have access. He even let an old couple walk their dog through the gate one morning after they apologized for how the HOA treated him. He wasn't looking for revenge. He was just making a point. At night, he sat on his porch like before. But now, the fence didn't bother him. It was no longer a symbol of power or control from others. It was just metal. What mattered now was the truth. And the truth was Jack had turned the tables. He had outsmarted the people who thought they could push him around. And deep down, he knew this was only the beginning. Jack had always believed in solving problems with patience. But now that he owned the small strip of land under the only gate, things had changed. He had tried talking before. He had asked for the code. He had waited for respect. But the HOA gave him none of that. They had treated him like dirt. So now, Jack had made his move. And it was a smart one. The keypad code was now in his control. The gate was still there, but only Jack could open it. He had changed the lock, added new wiring, and placed a bold sign that said, "Private property, keep out unless permitted." The gate stood tall, proud, and locked. The same way they had once locked him out, now he had done the same only legally. Jack didn't go around bragging. That wasn't who he was. Didn't put up banners or walk into HOA meetings to show off. He simply lived his life as before, but now he smiled a little more. He slept better. The small injustice they had done to him, the months of frustration and helplessness, were finally balanced. He hadn't broken the law. He hadn't shouted. He had simply bought the land they forgot about, and that made all the difference. But things didn't stay quiet for long. Soon, angry HOA board members started showing up at his ranch. One of them, a tall man with a stiff suit and a loud voice, knocked on Jack's door and said, "You need to remove that sign. This is a shared gate." Jack calmly answered, "Not anymore. The land under the gate belongs to me now. The documents are official. The county has approved them." The man's face turned red with frustration. He didn't have a reply. A few. Days later, Jack received a letter from the HOA. It was full of legal-sounding words. community disruption, trespassing, unreasonable behavior. Jack chuckled as he read it. They were trying to scare him, but he knew they had no case. In fact, they were the ones trespassing because the gate, the keypad, and the fence were all built without his permission on land that now belonged to him. Still, Jack didn't want to go through more fighting. He wanted peace. Smart again. He wrote a polite letter back to the HOA. In it, he explained the situation clearly. He attached copies of the legal documents proving he was the new owner of the land. He mentioned the construction permits, or lack of them, that proved the HOA had not even followed the proper process when they built the fence and gate. Then he wrote one simple sentence at the end. "You blocked me out of my own road. What was necessary to take control back? I will allow emergency access, mail delivery, and peaceful passage for those who show respect, but I will not give the code to those who ignored me." He printed the letter, signed it, and hand-delivered it to the HOA office himself. Within days, word spread throughout the neighborhood. The gate was locked. No one could get in or out from that side. People were angry. Some started shouting at HOA meetings. Few residents had never even known about Jack or the fence until now. All they knew was that their daily routine had been ruined. Some used to take that path for morning walks. Others used it for quick exits to avoid traffic. Now they were forced to take the long route. Some complained about being late to work, others about delivery drivers getting confused. One woman said she missed her doctor's appointment because she had to drive around and got stuck in traffic. The HOA began to panic. They tried to look for legal ways to force Jack to unlock the gate. But every lawyer they spoke to said the same thing. He owns the land. He has every right to deny access just like any property owner. The fence may belong to the HOA, but the ground it stands on, that belonged to Jack now, out of desperation. The HOA board invited Jack to a meeting. They were hoping to talk it out. Jack showed up, calm and respectful as always. He sat quietly as they complained about the trouble the neighborhood was facing. One woman stood and said, "You're punishing all of us for the actions of a few people on the board." Jack nodded slowly and replied, "That's what I told the HOA when you blocked my road." But no one listened then. The room went quiet. Man tried to offer Jack money. Said, "We'll buy the land from you." You name the price. But Jack shook his head. "It's not about money," he said. "You put up a fence on land that didn't belong to you. Now that you realize the mistake, you want to buy your way out. That doesn't fix the problem. That just proves you never respected me in the first place." One board member tried to act friendly and said, "We're sorry if we made you feel isolated. That was never our goal." Jack smiled gently. "It's too late for sorry," he said. "I'm not angry anymore. I just want my peace back." He got up and left. Back at his ranch, Jack continued to enjoy his peaceful life. He rode his horses in the evening, watered his garden, and fixed the roof of his barn by hand. The ranch. It was still simple, but now it felt stronger, like it had a wall of pride around it. Not just the fence. People from the neighborhood started driving the long way around, slowly accepting the new reality. Some were still angry. Others came by and apologized to Jack. He listened to them, gave a small nod, and sometimes even allowed them through the gate when he felt they were sincere. He wasn't cruel, just wanted to be respected, not ignored like before. One morning, a group of kids from the neighborhood came to his ranch. He brought cookies and a handmade card that said, "Sorry for the fence. We hope you're not mad." Jack smiled. He offered them apples from his tree and gave the card a place on his fridge. Not everyone in the neighborhood was bad. It was the board, the few people in power who caused the trouble. Jack had no interest in getting revenge. He didn't file a lawsuit against the HOA, even though he could have. He didn't charge a fee for anyone who wanted access through the gate. He didn't make demands or conditions. He simply used silence, ownership, and smart thinking to fight back, and he had won. And the best part? He had done it all legally. He didn't break the fence. He didn't yell. He didn't spray paint angry signs or make trouble. He just used the law, his brain, and a little bit of patience. He had outplayed a powerful organization without ever raising his voice. Now, when Jack looked at the gate, he didn't see frustration anymore. He saw victory, saw proof that even one man, living simply and quietly, could still stand up against a system that tried to ignore him. The gate was still locked, but now it stood for something more than just security. It stood for Jack's courage. As the days passed, fewer and fewer people complained. The HOA began focusing on other things. The residents slowly adjusted to the new routes. Jack, meanwhile, returned to his peaceful life, knowing that he had done something few people could do. He had taken on the HOA, and he had won. Jack never planned to start a war. He never wanted attention, and he definitely never asked to become the most talked about person in the neighborhood. But after he bought the land under the only gate and the fence that the HOA had built, everything changed. He had taken back control in his quiet, peaceful way, and now the whole community was watching. At first, the HOA had tried to fight back. They threatened him, sent letters, and even tried to take him to court. But the law was on Jack's side. He hadn't done anything wrong. He simply bought land that no one else had bothered to claim. That land just happened to sit under the only gate connecting the neighborhood to the outside road. After failing to defeat him with legal tricks, the HOA tried something new. They tried to be nice. Some of the board members who once ignored Jack suddenly wanted to talk things out. They sent friendly letters and even invited him for coffee. But Jack saw through it. These were the same people who had fenced him in without asking, ignored his requests, and treated him like a problem. That they needed him, they were smiling. Jack didn't hate them. He wasn't mean. He just didn't trust them anymore. Still, Jack wasn't a cruel man. He opened the gate for emergency services like fire trucks and ambulances. He let delivery drivers through when they were stuck, even waved at people who walked by with friendly faces. But the gate code? He kept that to himself. That was his quiet message. Respect is earned, not demanded. But some people still didn't understand that. One morning, Jack heard loud banging at the gate. When he walked over, he saw two HOA board members yelling and shaking the metal bars. One of them was the same man who had told him months ago that his land looked unfit for the community. Now that same man was demanding to be let in. Jack didn't shout, simply walked up, calm and steady, and asked, "Didn't you get the letter I sent?" The man replied, "We did, but this is ridiculous. You're holding the community hostage." Jack gave a small smile. "You blocked me out first. Remember?" The man's face turned red with anger. He said something rude and then stormed off. Jack just stood there, quiet. Didn't say another word. Didn't need to. A few days later, Jack noticed something strange. Workers were measuring land again, not on his ranch, but nearby. He followed at a distance, quietly watching. He later found out that the HOA had made a decision. They were going to build a new gate in another part of the neighborhood to replace the one Jack now controlled. Jack wasn't surprised. He expected this. But what made him shake his head was how much time, energy, and money the HOA was about to spend just to avoid admitting they were wrong. The new gate would cost thousands of dollars. It would take weeks to build, would require permits, and might even cause traffic changes. All of this just because they didn't want to apologize to one man. Jack didn't stop them. He let them do what they wanted. If they thought building another gate would fix everything, let them try. But deep down, he knew they were making things worse for themselves. The location wasn't good. The road there was narrow. The area was too close to a school zone. It would be chaos. While the HOA was busy planning their new gate, Jack was getting unexpected visitors. Some neighbors who had once avoided eye contact were now coming to talk. They said things like, "We didn't agree with what the HOA did, and you handled things better than most people would have." One elderly couple brought him a basket of fresh fruit. A teenage boy asked if he could pet Jack's horses. Jack welcomed them all. Over time, people in the neighborhood began to see Jack differently. He was no longer the strange ranch guy. He was the man who stood up for himself. The man who outsmarted the HOA without lifting a finger. The man who got locked out and then ended up owning the only key. One Sunday morning, something unusual happened. Ash saw a line of people standing. Near the gate, not angry people, calm people. Few had coffee mugs in hand. One woman held a small sign that said, "We're sorry." Jack didn't know what to do at first. He walked over, curious. That's when the woman stepped forward and said, "We want to make peace." She explained that many in the neighborhood had nothing to do with the HOA's decisions. They just wanted to live in peace, like Jack did. She said they were tired of the fights, the meetings, the rules, the stress. They admired how Jack had stayed calm through all of it. Then she said something that stayed with him. "You taught us that standing your ground doesn't always mean raising your voice." Jack looked at the people. Some were families. Some were older folks. Some were teenagers. They didn't look fake. They looked honest. So Jack did something unexpected. He opened the gate. He didn't say much, just a small nod, and then he stepped aside. One by one, people walked through. Some thanked him. A child gave him a drawing of a horse and wrote, "Thank you, Jack," in crayon. Jack smiled. It was a quiet moment, but powerful, but not everyone was happy. When the HOA board found out Jack had opened the gate to residents without giving them the code, they were furious. They sent another letter, this one full of demands. They said if Jack didn't return control of the gate to the HOA, it would take stronger legal action. Jack didn't reply. Instead, he called a lawyer this time, not to defend himself, but to prepare for his own move. The lawyer reviewed everything: the land purchase, the fence, the HOA threats, and the public records. Then he gave Jack some advice. They're trying to break you down, but the law is still on your side. If they keep pushing, we can counter. Jack wasn't afraid. He'd come too far to back down now. So instead of getting angry, Jack got creative. He decided to build something new, a small walking path along the edge of his land that connected to a peaceful public road. He did all the work himself. He laid down stones, trimmed the grass, and even put up small lights. Then he put up a sign that read, "Welcome neighbors, use with respect." People were shocked. Jack had built a better, easier path than the HOA ever had. It was quiet, safe, and beautiful. Kids rode bikes on it. Elderly couples took walks. Every time someone passed Jack, they smiled and waved. Meanwhile, the HOA's new gate project was stuck. The city hadn't approved the location. The cost had doubled. Residents were upset about the noise. And now, more people were using Jack's path than ever used the old gate. The HOA finally realized what had happened. They had lost not because of money or lawyers or force, but because of one man's patience, cleverness, and kindness. They had tried to control Jack, and now Jack had gained the respect of the entire community. Jack didn't laugh at their failure. He didn't brag, just kept living one peaceful day at a time. He woke up early, fed his horses, watered his garden, and fixed things around the ranch. He watched the sunset from his porch, listening to the wind in the trees. The fence was still there, but now it meant nothing. He had turned their fence into a story of quiet strength, and he knew in his heart that even though he didn't win with fists or anger, he had truly won. Things had changed a lot since the HOA built that fence around Jack's ranch in the beginning. They thought they were powerful. They thought they could control everything and everyone, including Jack. They thought they could build a fence, lock, a gate, and push him aside like he didn't matter. But now the tables had completely turned. The neighborhood that once avoided Jack was now quietly admiring him. People who once saw him as the strange ranch guy now saw him as the man who stood his ground, not with shouting or violence, but with calm, patience, and cleverness. Jack had become something rare, a quiet hero, even though the HOA tried everything to regain control. Lawsuits, threats, offers of money, they failed. Only bought the land under the gate, but also turned the situation into something meaningful. His walking path became more popular than any HOA plan. His act of forgiveness, letting people through when they asked nicely, had earned him more respect than the HOA ever had. He never asked for power. But now, he had it because people trusted him more than the HOA board. But Jack didn't let it go to his head. He kept things simple. Every morning, he did his chores, feeding his horses, checking the fences, watering the garden. He didn't wear fancy clothes, didn't buy new trucks or put up banners. he just lived. The way he always had. That's what made his story even more powerful. Jack proved something the HOA never understood. True power doesn't come from control. It comes from quiet strength, honesty, respect. The neighborhood changed too. People were more careful about how they treated others. Some HOA board members quietly stepped down. A new group of residents started attending meetings, asking for fewer rules and more kindness. They remembered what happened to Jack, and they didn't want to make the same mistake again. One day, Jack received an official letter. This time, it wasn't a threat. It was an invitation. The new HOA board was holding a community gathering, a barbecue event, and they wanted Jack to come as the guest of honor. At first, Jack wasn't sure. He wasn't a party person. He liked peace and quiet, not attention. But after thinking about it for a day, he decided to go, not for the food or the spotlight, because it felt like a turning point. Maybe things really were changing. When Jack arrived at the park, something surprising happened. People stood up. They clapped. Some even cheered softly. It wasn't loud or crazy. It was honest. Quiet respect. The kind Jack understood best. Hey. Few of the new board members came over and shook his hand. One of them, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, said, "We're sorry for what happened, and we're thankful for how you handled it."
Hey, Jack didn't give a long speech.
He just nodded and said, "I'm glad people learned from it. That's all that matters." Kids ran up to him with paper drawings of his horses. Some families asked if they could visit his ranch one day. Jack smiled and told them, "You're welcome anytime, as long as you close the gate behind you." The barbecue wasn't about food anymore. It had become something bigger, a symbol of peace between two sides. It was a way of saying, "We remember what we did, we see you now, and we respect you." After the event, Jack returned to his ranch. The sun was setting, painting the sky in gold and orange. He sat on his porch, a mug of warm tea in his hand, and looked out at the peaceful land he had worked so hard to keep. He remembered the early days. When the fence first went up, how trapped he felt, how angry, how disrespected. He remembered walking around the fence, looking for help, writing letters, asking for the gate code like a beggar. He remembered how no one listened, how the HOA treated him like an outsider. And now, the fence was still there. The gate too. But they no longer had power over him. He owned the gate. He owned the land. It gained not just property, but something even better. Dignity. He had taught the entire community something they wouldn't forget. Weeks passed, then months. Seasons changed. Jack kept living quietly, simply. But his story stayed alive. A local journalist heard about it and came to interview him. Jack didn't want to be famous, but the woman asked politely, and Jack agreed to a short conversation. She wrote an article titled, "The Man Who Bought a Gate and Opened Hearts." People across the town read it. Some wrote letters to Jack, saying how much his story meant to them. Retired veteran wrote, "You reminded me what honor looks like." Teacher said, "I read your story to my students." They clapped. Jack never asked for praise, but he was touched. He never imagined his small battle with a fence could inspire so many. One day, while walking along his path, he saw a new sign near the end. Someone had placed it there without asking, but it made Jack smile. It said, "Sometimes the quietest man makes the loudest difference." Jack didn't touch the sign. He left it there. Over time, the community grew more united. The HOA changed. Its rules, fewer restrictions, more open discussions. They even created a new policy. No construction on shared boundaries without permission from all neighbors. That was Jack's rule, now written in their books. People often waved at Jack now, when they drove past. Some even stopped to chat, asking about his horses or garden. Children would visit his ranch on weekends, sometimes helping him with small chores. Jack loved teaching them about simple things: how to plant a seed, how to listen to animals, how to sit in silence and hear nature speak. He became more than a landowner. He became a friend, a mentor, a quiet example of how to stand your ground with grace. Years later, when the gate finally rusted and needed replacing, Jack didn't call the HOA. He built a new one himself with wooden panels, smooth hinges, and a sign that said, "Respect all who pass." It became more than just a gate. It became a symbol of everything that happened, of pain turned into peace, of fences that once divided now opening paths for kindness. And Jack kept living like he always wanted to, from the heart, with dignity and peace.